talk to you this afternoon. Obviously my main subject matter was personal reflective perspective of my professional experiences, really in relation to the fire industry in Scotland, but I would say it actually goes wider than that. As we've already alluded to, many of our speakers have actually talked about it this morning and this afternoon. But I think what I'd quite like to do, I should say, if those of you don't know me, my name's Colin. I actually currently head up a small team in the Scottish Government Building Standards Division dealing with fire, structure and environment. I also had certification, which was all to do with competence a few years ago, but post Grenfell, the job was getting a bit too much, and they managed to take certification off me, and I'll speak about that a little bit later actually. So I would like to take you really back to the start of my career. And as a typical school leaver, I really didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, to be honest with you. It was just, I didn't fancy following my brother and sister into university and academia and all that malarkey. I just wanted to earn money and be able to enjoy myself. So I found this little job advert in the local paper, junior building inspector. And that's basically where I started out life at the local council as a junior building inspector. I thought the word inspector was quite appealing, it sounded quite important, so well, why not give it a go? And it kind of went from there. Call me naive, of course, because the very first thing that the council done was send me on this epic journey of academia and lifelong learning. So couple of years ONC in building, HNC in building, supplementary course in building regulations, diploma in building control, then 2-year diary, and ultimately a test of competence. When you add all that together, it's basically like 10 years of your life, to become this full member of the Chartered Institute of Surveyors at the time. I also applied for the IFE and was fortunate enough to get full membership of the IFE, probably through the back door. But I have to say, I'm probably one of these people that do fully embrace lifelong learning, because I'm actually currently studying to do a Bachelor of Engineering, Fire Risk Engineering at Glasgow Cali, and I'll need to behave myself because I can see somebody in the audience who will be marking some of my stuff. So I would say it has been lifelong learning. My first experience, I would say, probably with non-compliance with the building regulations was really my first week in the job. My supervisor was elsewhere in this 4-storey mill conversion into a block of flats, and my job was to supervise this drain test, So immediately I thought that something was fishy, because it was 2 pumps and the smoke box went up, and that was supposed to pressurise an entire system. So I obviously had the knowledge to know that something wasn't quite right. And then when I heard the pull the plug Jimmy or whatever, and then I heard this hissing sound underneath the floorboards, and then a little bit of scurrying, I realised that there was an apprentice plumber underneath the floor whose job was to let down this canvas balloon. I'd only been testing about that length of pipe, and I knew straight away we had a bit of a compliance problem on our hands, Latterly in my career at Stirling Council, my first really experience of non-compliances was at the local shopping centre. We were dealing with BR 187 at the time, which some of you will probably remember. And M&E manager decides in his wisdom that he's going to replace this fan with a more powerful fan. And I thought, that doesn't sound great. I was thinking noise levels, I was thinking potential plug holing of the smoke layer, etc. And this is all self-taught fire engineering, by the way. You read the book in 187, you're trying to ask sort of pertinent questions. So, and sure enough, plug holing existed. The whole thing didn't work properly, and you couldn't even hear the voice alarm system over the sound of these bloody Rolls-Royce engine fans, So they eventually had to replace all the fans, etc. And it was quite an experience to have to go through that, and obviously all the political pressure of opening a shopping centre on time when the thing didn't comply with anything that it should have complied with. So anyway, that was my reflections on compliance in the early years. I joined the Scottish Government in 2001 as a fire engineer, I have to say, and a technical author of Section 2 Fire. At that time, the Sixth Amendment had just been born, Sixth Amendment to the technical standards. You might remember the TF 2000 project. We were speaking about timber structures earlier on. That was a 6-storey timber frame block of flats, obviously full-scale fire tests, if you like, and ultimately led to changes to the technical handbooks back in 2002. So we could build 6-storey timber structures in Scotland. I should point out that just literally within a couple of months of me working the World Trade Centre, obviously the Twin Towers disaster and collapse, and I got involved with the Building Disaster Advisory Group just following that. £2.5 million of taxpayers' money got spent on that project, which was quite a significant sum of money. I was also involved in a residential splinter steering group at the time, which was a 2.5-year project, and various BSI committees. You'll remember DD 240 and 7974, DD 9999, the forefather of 9999, all of those kind of committees. So I very quickly learned, in my short time that I'd been with the government, that I didn't know the first thing about fire at all. I thought I knew enough to get by, but I realised I was just scratching the surface. It was pretty much skin deep. So it has been a lifelong learning experience, I have to say. We have introduced the new building standard system, as you know, in 2005, and I've led on various technical reviews over the years. I have to say a very sobering experience was the Rose Park Care Home fire, obviously, on the 31st of January 2004. And you know, we were one of the interested parties that was represented by a QC. There was something like 21 advocates and QCs involved in that inquiry. I felt sorry for obviously the families of the residents at the time, because it took something like 10 years before it could even get to the fatal accident inquiry stage, because of those various failures in the actual prosecution process. On the back of the sprinkler research and indeed the political impetus, obviously you'll be aware that we introduced sprinklers into all care homes from 2005. So it's quite nice to sort of reflect and think that you maybe made a little bit of a difference. But Al was talking earlier on about contribution to this reduction in deaths and injuries, and I definitely would agree with this statement here, that without that collaborative effort we will not go to where we are now. I started, as I say, in 2001 at the government. It was almost double the fire deaths and injuries since 2001, and that steady decline, and that is because of that collective effort with the fire service, fire engineers, regulators, but principally targeting obviously deaths in the home primarily. I'm not being complacent about non-domestic, and I'll touch on that in a wee moment. I would say, to sum up all that, I'm a great believer in the circle of life. So you start off with this, say, regulation. I was involved with mandatory technical standards, mandatory requirements. You had to go through Parliament to get a change. We went through kind of deregulation, guidance. The fire certificates went, they went replaced, if you like, with your fire risk assessments. So you go through this regulation, deregulation, disaster, and then more regulation, and then it goes through the cycle again. And as long as you know where you're on that wheel, you can kind of keep your sanity. That's the best way I could describe it, So what's worked well? I would say I kind of struggled with this one, because I'm not a prophet of doom, but I couldn't really think of any good examples. But I did jot a few down. So independent local authority building standards compared to, say, private approved inspectors down south. I think that was a plus, having the independence, absolutely. So that's independent from the contractor, and he is paying, he is paying the bills, etc. So we maintained in Scotland the preemptive system. In other words, you need to get a warrant before you can start work. So the plans need to get approved in advance rather than just starting willy-nilly and taking the risk. We do audit verifiers, local authority verifiers, the Scottish Government. We do audit certifiers and scheme providers. So again, back to that code of ethics, looking over your shoulder. It all I quite like the certification and verification audit systems to try and improve performance. And I think over the years we've had greater collaborative working with the industry, including trade associations and academia, government and local government, producing research, publications, all pretty much freely available. You heard about the work that Ricky was doing this morning and how to access it on the website. And I would also say the government is now more and more open and transparent than we've ever been. So clearly on the back of Grenfell, the ministerial working group that was set up and the Building Standards Future Board, all those minutes and meetings and direction of travel, you can actually see how the whole journey progressed now. So it's online and you can get a feel for the strategic direction. So, and I just done it this morning, I just googled Building Standards Futures Board, what is that? If you go home, and that will give you the strategic direction of government, where we're going on this whole agenda. What hasn't worked so well, in no particular order, the performance-based system that we introduced in 2005 with these functional requirements, these statements of intent that Al mentioned, backed up with guidance. I think there is greater recognition, certainly, that you can use alternative approaches, that you don't have to follow the guidance, but in the last 15 years, I have to say, there's still quite pockets of it, and intransigence where local authority officials are very much hiding behind the words of the technical handbooks rather than the intent, and very much defend that as almost like the mandatory line. So that has not worked as well as we had hoped. And clearly, obviously, this stifles innovation. Does little to promote fire safety, certainly from first principles and certainly from that holistic approach that's been mentioned. And the Meacham research that was done for us, Brian Meacham, basically criticised our own functional statements. And this is, I'm just going to plant a little seed, and we can maybe chat about it later, but Brian Meacham basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but we should really have performance or performance measures within the functional statements, or maybe the next level down, but still high enough level on things like tenability criteria or whatever. So in other words, how can you measure equivalence if you're not following the book? And that's one that I'm going to come back to. Fire engineering designs, I have to say the ones that came over my desk, I would say I'm sadly lacking in detail, the ones that I've seen personally. I accept I'm one step divorced from the coalface now, but I haven't been awfully impressed with the level of detail, and I think it's possibly what Al's alluded to was the issue there. What am I employed to do? What is my job? It's only that small little bit to obtain the building warrant, etc., rather than this whole question of trying to look at fire safety from first principles. We've seen misuse, if you like, of CFD modelling over the years, and not really any proper analysis of asset and RSET, and even setting out what the margins of safety are. In other words, is it safe? Regardless of what the technical handbook says, is it intrinsically safe? So I've been a little bit disappointed with that, I have to say, over the years. But I fully accept, as I say, that fire engineers involved in the building work process do rely on their client briefs, and there's no getting away from that. And there's ultimately brought into the process late on, and predominantly late on. You guys can maybe agree or disagree with me on that one. I have issues also with this business about comparative code compliant approach, and I know it's cited in 7974, but there is a tendency to sort of specify unrealistic worst case fire scenarios against, I say, a code compliant building or whatever, and then try and justify deviations from the technical handbooks through applying compensatory features. Again, no analysis of the risk or whether there's sufficient margin of safety. So the other thing I want to say about not working quite as well as I would like is the whole compliance agenda. And I could have probably started with that first, because since I first started out in life, compliance has always been a huge problem. Whatever regulations, you can have the best regulations in the world, but if nobody else is enforcing them and they're not being complied with, what is the point? And that's what raises lots of interesting questions. But I would also say that procurement's got a huge role to play in this, and unrealistic deadlines from clients. I feel sorry for contractors to a certain extent, because if they get set unrealistic targets from their clients, deadlines, there's only going to go one way. So there has to be a bit of realism round about that whole procurement problem. Various models have been tried around the world, as you're probably all aware. More certification, more reliance on competence, chartered engineers versus independent checks by local authority officials, completely independent from the actual contractors. Clerk of Works have been mentioned on the back of the Cole report and various other things as well. So do we need that balance between competence and independent inspectors? Is that the model going forward? Do we need to double the number of building inspectors? What is the government strategic direction? And at the moment, it's still an evolving issue. I was involved in certification, and one of my roles was to try and promote third-party certification. And what was mentioned this morning with Sharon McClure from Avesta, etc. There's some very good companies out there that do spend a lot of time on their CPD, and I think we should really benefit from that wisdom and take them up on that CPD. We do cross-refer to third-party certification in the technical handbooks, but it's not mandatory at the moment. Obviously there's a whole competency agenda going on down in the UK government, and we're just looking to see how that direction of travel is going to pan out in terms of how they're going to tackle this whole question of licensing of builders, competency of designers, installers, constructors. Product certification. I could rattle on all afternoon, but obviously the fire door that was tested in Grenfell that failed after 15 minutes, led to the whole composite door market getting taken off the market. Clearly there's an issue about using digital transformation to try and trace from testing of factory to lorry to on-site, then checked by the inspector. The technology is there, the chips are there, the codes are there. We should be able to trace the materials as they go through their journey and end up on site. So what needs to change and what do we need to do? I'm just going to finish up here, but I think the strategic direction that we're currently doing in the Futures Board was really set up following the recommendations of a couple of review panels, but principally I would say Professor John Cole's review panel looking at enforcement and compliance. So there's about 7 work streams. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. Have a look online, Google Building Standards Futures Board. That will get you a clearer idea of direction of travel. But one thing I wanted to say before leaving today was on that issue about performance measures and what do we have in the functional standards, how can you measure equivalence and all that kind of stuff. I think we probably need to have a proper adult conversation about this and decide on whether we want to specify clear smoke layers. Do we want to specify temperatures? Some councils, I'm aware, accept escaping through smoke, others don't. There is no consistency whatsoever. So what is it ultimately we want to set as rules that we all work within, where you could actually do alternative approaches and arrive at, hopefully, a building that is similar level of safety, if not higher, with a sufficient margin of safety. So I think we as government need to get better at predicting. You've heard about these fires in ACM earlier on. We need to get better at predicting unintended consequences. For example, the combustible cladding ban in England, together with the expert panel's advice, my crystal ball was telling me this is not going to end well, and ultimately led to the complete meltdown in the mortgage lending industry and not being able to release monies, etc. So much so that we're now applying a standard to our existing high-rise building stock in Scotland that is higher than brand new buildings that could get built tomorrow to even the October 2019 edition of the handbooks. So my final message really is to get involved with the Future Board workshops, any research projects that we're involved in. I think working collaboratively together is definitely the future, and sharing knowledge and understanding. And I think together we will make a difference. So thank you very much.